wait a couple minutes.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. We are so pleased to have people at this meeting from all parts of the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 17 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 288th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. We wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Grammatia project. For 287 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 5 years and 7 months, we have featured 1,157 presenters from all parts of the world speaking on 287 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are kindly asking for suggestions and volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our post and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. So we have some good news, and we want to extend happy birthday greetings to Sham Archery, husband of Dr. Kogi of South Africa, who turned 60 last week, as well as Pratap Sarju, father of Anisha Raghuber, who turned 90 years last week. May they live long, healthy, and happy lives. So I'll introduce our moderator today, who is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thank you so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a warm welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for choosing to be here with us. This program is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. Welcome to everyone on YouTube at this time. To avoid intrusions from trolls, I just want to remind our speakers that you have been muted. Please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screens. Thanks so much for your cooperation. I want to reiterate Shakira's greetings to our good brother Sham, as well as Mr. Partab Sarju, who we had the pleasure of meeting while we were in South Africa. Today we are talking about funerary rites and ritual practices in the Indian diaspora. And just like birth is a natural part of life, so is death. We know that funeral rites and ritual practices have traditionally reflected deeply rooted beliefs about death, the soul, and the afterlife. We are very familiar with cremations for Hindus. In some countries, there are burials for Hindus. Muslims generally swiftly bury following death. And there are prayers and purification rites. Christians also conduct funerals with wakes and hymns and interment. During ancient times, these practices were often elaborate and community-centered. To some extent, it still is today, but in the modern era, there have been some adaptations, and these involved social structures, mobility, and technology. Disasters and pandemics such as hurricanes, and of course, we remember the COVID-19 period, have sometimes forced modifications. And these include shortened rites, restrictions on gatherings, and delays or alterations to cremations and burial processes. Things have changed as a result. And we have Loshni Naidu from South Africa, who shared an opinion with us that funerals in the post-COVID Indian diaspora changed. She expressed disappointment in the new formats, noting funerals have now become more of a social gathering with decor, bagpipes, setting doves free, fancy hearses, and women dressed in saris, which would be more appropriate at weddings, and at which long-lost friends and relatives are treated to meals. Right here in Trinidad and Tobago, we had embalming of bodies which were paraded out in the open as if they were sitting on thrones on open back vehicles. So things have changed, but we want to hear from our speakers today what these things mean for us going forward. Professor Keith McNeil is our first speaker. We're very happy to have him. He's an associate professor of anthropology in the Department of Comparative Cultural Studies at the University of Houston in the USA, specializing in Caribbean ethnology and Atlantic history. Welcome, Professor McNeil.
Thank you so much. Good day, good morning, good night, good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are around the world. It's really an honor and pleasure to be here. Can you hear me all right? Is everything okay? Okay, good. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And before I make my remarks and share what I want to share, I do want to salute everyone involved in this weekly Zoom call, which has been going on for 5 years since the pandemic. It really is a magnificent achievement, super important, and really a labor of love. So I want to salute all of you who, the team behind this. It's really a great thing, and I'm happy to be here. Can't always make every weekly session, but I'm really happy that they're archived online. So I am an anthropologist and a historian. Most of my work has focused on Trinidad and Tobago, where I've been in and out since 1997, actually, going on 30 years almost. It's pretty amazing. I have lived there off and on over that period of time, about 13 plus years now over the long trajectory. And I've done a lot of work. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share the first 10 minutes of a documentary film that I'm working on. I'm working on a book project on the history of Indo-Trinidadian death, mortuary ritual, funerary praxis, and the post-colonial revitalization of pyrocyte cremation, which is an endlessly interesting story. But instead of getting too academic, which I have a whole book's worth of material I could talk about, I thought it would be most interesting to share about the first 10 minutes of the draft of the film I'm working on with a Nigerian Trinidadian filmmaker who I want to give a shout out to as well, Oyetayo Ojawade. And then I'll make some remarks about the history that we're dealing with. Very, very brief remarks. Just as a quick little background, my first project was, or really my first book project is a comparative study of African and Hindu religions in TNT and the Southern Caribbean more broadly, specifically a comparative case study of Orisha worship on the African side and Kali Puja or ecstatic Shakti worship on the Hindu side. That book was published in 2011. Since that time, my work in religious studies has really focused on the Indo-Caribbean side and specifically Caribbean Hinduism in a number of different ways, but this is a really important project of mine, specifically the death and mortuary ritual research. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen now, and you'll get a sneak peek at my forthcoming documentary. It's called Burning Identity. I'm actually not 99, I'm not 100% happy with the title. I'm not sure I want identity in the title, and I would love feedback from you all about what you see and also the title, because I don't know, shifting from being an academic into a filmmaker when you don't have the training is quite a leap. So here, let me share, and we will screen the first 9 or 10 minutes. Can you see?
Yeah, it's coming up. Can we get
Okay,
audio
it should be a
as
blank
well?
screen. It's a blank screen, so.
ध्रुवं जन्म मृतस्य च तस्मादपरिहार्येते न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि।
We're not getting the sound clearly, Keith.
What?
Death has always been a mysterious topic for us. More so, we find surrounding that topic much superstition, confusion, and even fear, when in fact it is a normal part of life.
The first cremation took place in the Labas, Mr. Kirpalan. And the preparation was different. In the days of Mr. Kirpalani, when he died, they dug a hole. They dug a hole. They dug a hole, put in the hole and put the body on top. The body couldn't be completely burned, so they covered it. The first proper cremation that took place in Trinidad was Mr. Balkarani Singh.
My father.
His father, my uncle.
When I first came to Trinidad in the late 1990s, it was standard for Hindus to cremate their dead on pyres at special cremation sites. There are 5 cremation sites around the island, 1 in north, 2 in central Trinidad, 1 in south, and 1 in the east. All of them are situated near bodies of water, either rivers or the sea. The locations of these sites essentially track historical patterns of Indian habitation in Trinidad. Pyreside cremation is especially intense if you have not experienced it before. Seeing the dead person lying in a box placed on the wooden pyre, open to the sky, and watching it burn is dramatic even for those who are familiar with it. It is definitive, final, ashes to ashes, as some say. This makes cremation radically different from burial, in which the dead is disappeared underground, where it decomposes slowly out of sight. I had observed pyreside cremations while living in India when I was 21 years old during visits to Kolkata and Varanasi, 2 of the most sacred locations for Hindu cremation.
but my first experience of the cremation of someone I knew was in Trinidad in 1999. A close friend's mother died tragically, and I went through the entire ritual process up close and personal with my friend, as he was the eldest son, and it is tradition for him to conduct the elaborate and drawn-out set of rituals for the dead, immediately after the death for 2 weeks, and then intermittently for an entire year after. My friend's mother, who was very kind to me, was cremated at the Hindu site located on the west coast of Trinidad on the Gulf of Paria, connected with the Sudas Sadhu Shiva Mandir, or Temple by the Sea, as it is affectionately better known. What's especially interesting is that not only Hindu Indo-Trinidadians cremate their dead on open-air pyres nowadays, but also some Christian Indians too, for reasons that took me a while to understand. Yet it was not always this way. Indeed, cremation only started becoming prevalent among Trinidadian Hindus in the 1980s and 1990s, a decade before I met the practice in the late 1990s. I have reconstructed the history of Indo-Trinidadian mortuary ritual over the last decade, and it turns out to be a story with many fascinating twists and surprising turns. This history is not only intriguing in and of itself, but also enables retelling the story of Indians in the Caribbean in a new way. Well, I first started coming to Trinidad 25 years ago now already. In 1997, I've lived here about 12 or 13 years now total, over that 25-year period of time. But how I arrived in Trinidad is an interesting story. It wasn't straightforward. I actually lived in India for almost a year when I was 21 years old. I participated in a Buddhist studies exchange program, a student exchange program, where we lived, about 15 students or so, it was a small group. We lived in a town called Bodh Gaya, which is in the northeastern Indian state of Bihar. Bodh Gaya is where the Buddha was enlightened. So there are many temples and monasteries from, different traditions and backgrounds. It's like essentially the Jerusalem for Buddhism, the most important pilgrimage site for Buddhism. But of course, living in India, doing Buddhist studies, I was also doing Hindu studies, learning about the tradition, observing ritual and religious practices around me. And one interesting thing is that Bodh Gaya is a really important site for the observance of Pitri Paksh. Pitri Paksh is an annual auspicious time of the year in which Hindus remember their ancestors, they commemorate them, they make offerings and prayer and, pay their respects. And I watched people making pindas, these rice flour balls, making pindas and, making offerings for Pitri Paksh. I also traveled around India and Nepal, and among the many things that I observed and experienced were cremations on ghats in especially Varanasi and Kolkata. I spent many hours and even some nights just sitting there next to the riverbank in both Varanasi and Kolkata, watching the activity, watching the pyres be built, watching the corpse be brought, the rituals take place, and then, the pyre would be lit and the bodies would burn. It was a very, a compelling thing for me growing up in Oklahoma. So these were experiences that they were like seeds that sort of got planted and germinated, seeds of interest and curiosity. The other thing about living in Bihar is that the state of Bihar is next to the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is the area from which the majority of Indians who came as indentured laborers to Trinidad, they came from that exact area. The Caribbean wasn't on my radar at all at the time when I was there, but it's interesting and meaningful for me in hindsight to know that the area of India where I lived is the area from which the majority of Indians who came and the Hindus who came to this island to the Southern Caribbean, they hailed from that region. So it's a really important connection for me in terms of both my personal connection, but the research connections as well.
समुंदर पार कराए के एक नवा देश के सपना दिखाए के कैसे
Okay, I'm going to stop there. That's just the first 10 minutes kind of as a teaser, but also to introduce the project and give a little sense for like who I am and how I came to this project. I'm now going to share a hand-drawn historical schema, which is going to look kind of busy and complicated, but I'm going to talk through it kind of quickly. And I can also share it in the chat so that people can take a closer look. Oh no, how do I do that? Actually, I think I'll just share my screen. Yeah, I'll do that and open this. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I work all the time. I'm teaching a course overload. I have too much going on and I wasn't able to do a fancy graphics for you all. So this is a hand-drawn. But yeah, so essentially for the last decade or so, I've been reconstructing the history of death, mortuary ritual, funerary practice, among Hindus in specifically Trinidad, although I have like a growing sense for the story in Guyana and Suriname as well. They're relatively similar stories, but there's also a few interesting differences as I'm learning the comparative situation in the Caribbean. But really, I mean, there's so much that could be said about this history. It is very complicated. There are lots of twists and turns, as I say in the, you know, at the beginning, at the little clip of the documentary that you saw. But I think that the point that the main thing I want to share with you all today in terms of this history, given, you know, only the short amount of time that I have, we can come back to questions in the Q&A, and I also have a lot of photos and videos queued in the background. So depending on what we talk about, what people are interested in, I can pull up some other stuff, you know, looking at different, kind of zooming into different aspects of this history along the way. But essentially the main, the main point or in terms of this overall story, the main plot line that I want to emphasize and pull out here is that Hindus in Trinidad buried from, you know, from the beginning of arrival in the colony of Trinidad in the beginning with indentureship in the mid 19th century, and essentially buried their dead. So there are multiple methods of corpse disposal, right? Burial, cremation. There's even water traditions that dispose of the body in water. Parsis in Bombay, you know, they put their dead at the top of towers where vultures will come. There are, you know, multiple methods for disposing of the corpse, but essentially Hindus in Trinidad buried their dead all the way. So here's a timeline, right? Can you see my cursor if I use it as like a pointer? So,
Yes.
okay, great. So essentially, really the rise of, I mean, at this point in time, pretty much almost all Hindus, it's standard for Hindus to cremate their dead in contemporary Trinidad, in contemporary society, right? But what's proven to be really interesting is that actually that really didn't sort of come into being and get established as standard practice until like essentially the last quarter of the 20th century. So the 1980s, 90s, and turning into the 21st century, we have the rise and establishment of fireside cremation as standard practice among Hindus. Even in the 1970s, there was an Indian, J.C. Jha was I think a historian or a sociologist. Anyway, he was at UE St. Augustine in Trinidad in the 70s, and he did a lot of really important research. And one of the things he looked into were the samskars, the Hindu rites of passage. And he found that even in the 70s, most Hindus that he spoke to, they essentially thought that cremating the dead was backward, unhygienic, kind of primitive or something, which I thought was extremely interesting when I read that. He published this paper in the late 70s. So it's really from the 80s into the 90s and into the present that cremation, pyrocyte cremation really sort of, is rises up and is established as standard practice. I'm putting my pointer at the bottom left over here. Antyasti Samskar is the body of ritual, the last rites of passage, and they're very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. There's, it has a specific timetable immediately from the death, the day of the funeral, and then for 12 to 13 days after, ending with the bandara. But then there are offerings and there are things that are done intermittently throughout the rest of the year. And there's a lot that we could even say about how that body of ritual, specifically the last rites of passage, the Antyasti Samskar, how that body of ritual was transformed and condensed as a result of, adapting to imperial domination in the British colonial Caribbean. I looked and looked and looked and looked and looked, and there is no evidence. There's apparently no evidence for any cremation at all during the indentureship period, except the only reference that I've seen is in a newspaper article by the late Angelo Besessar Singh, who claims that there was a cremation in the 1880s on Frederick Estate in central Trinidad, but he died actually really soon after he published this newspaper article in 2013, and he doesn't give a source at that in that article. He just says according to records. So I mean, cremation could have happened, but it would have been a big effort, a lot of labor sourcing the materials, and also it's such a spectacular thing. It would have been difficult. It would have been unlikely to happen and not be noticed by like colonial overseers, et cetera. So what's super interesting is that essentially Hindus buried all the way up until the more or less until the last quarter of the 20th century. In 1940, there's a really important incident. The Kirpalani brothers were Sindhi brothers, Metaram and Murlidhar Kirpalani. They came in the 20s or 30s and were really important businessmen, importing early Bollywood films, et cetera, et cetera. And when Metaram, who was the younger brother, died, actually, they're from India, and he wanted to be cremated. So they petitioned the colonial governor at that point in time. And because they were high profile, wealthy, important Indian expats in the colony of Trinidad, it's still a colony at that point. The colonial administration did grant permission for him to be cremated, which in a sense was a kind of like a win for Hindu cultural and religious rights. But it was also a slap in the face because the place that the colonial governor granted for that special exceptional cremation was the Labas. So anyone who, people outside of Trinidad wouldn't know that the Labas is a huge, huge, huge trash dump just outside of Port of Spain. I have looked in vain for images. I do have one newspaper article documenting that. And then throughout the 40s, there was a really intense discussion and debate within the Colonial Legislative Council. I've written in one article. Oh, by the way, I have several publications. I'm happy to share those with anyone who's interested. I write about this period of time and the debate and the effort to get cremation, marriage, a whole set of cultural and religious rights attained in the late colony. Pyrecide cremation was legalized in 1953, legalization. Interestingly, that was the same colonial legislative council that decriminalized spiritual baptism as well. There was a Shouters prohibition ordinance passed in 1917. So for more than 30 years, the practice of spiritual or shouter baptism, which is an Afro-Protestant group, was outlawed. And it was exactly the same colonial legislative council that decriminalized spiritual Baptist practice on the African side and granted the right to cremate on pyres. So the first legal cremation that we know about was in 1954. A year later, you saw a glimpse of, we finally sourced the location on the Caroni River at El Socorro South in northern Trinidad. That was Mr. Balkaran Singh, Satnarayan Balkaran Singh's father, and you saw his uncle. His uncle was a teenager, so I think he's the only living witness to that first legal cremation, which happened in 1954. And as I said, so what's interesting, note that pyrecide cremation was legalized in the early 50s, but it's still several decades before pyrecide cremation actually is like taken up by the Hindu community at large and becomes standard practice. That's a very interesting question. Why? Why did people not start cremating when it became legalized? Why did it take something like 30 years or so, a generation or two, for Hindus to adopt cremation as their method of corpse disposal at the for the funerals? What's interesting is that the rise of pyrecide cremation essentially correlates rather directly to the rise of forthright Indian political power, with the rise of the UNC, dissolution of the NAR government in the late 80s, and then moving forward, pyrecide cremation is essentially standard practice. I don't have that much more to say, although I could. But just to wrap up, I'm watching the time. Pretty soon after that, mechanical crematoria were incorporated into the into Hindu funerals. So, using the retort in funeral homes, the actual, like the ovens for cremating the dead. And Hindus now, if they cremate their dead in a mechanical crematorium, the official term is called retort. Some of the rituals are actually done, inside the funeral home, circumambulating the crematoria inside the funeral homes. And I have some really interesting footage about that. And another interesting development is that once Indo-Trinidadian Hindus started cremating their dead, a really interesting sort of new transformation has been the kind of gradual adoption of pyrecide cremation by Christian Indians, right? Because there's a sense that cremating is like, the authentic, essential Indian way. And there are increasing numbers of Christian Indians who are cremating their dead at Hindu sites, but they have their dead in a closed casket rather than an open casket. And of course, a pastor or the Christian leader sermonizes and reads from the Bible. But these are happening at Hindu cremation sites. This is another super interesting piece of the story. I'll just end with two other remarks, just to put more on the table. And during the pandemic, people in Trinidad will know, maybe in the Caribbean more broadly, but during the pandemic, the then government, the People's National Movement government, actually banned. Of course, there was a whole set of public health restrictions and new parameters and restrictions on public events, assembling people together, but especially this affected obviously funerals, indoor funerals, but even outdoor pyrocyte cremations were banned. And interestingly, that ban was not lifted. It was lifted the latest of all the funeral restrictions. And there was one legal case. I know the woman who brought the case against the government. She sued the government of TNT because, restrictions on, she wanted to cremate her father. Her father wanted to be cremated, and that was really important to them. And they were unable to do so. She sued the government, and that's a really important case, which in a sense, it's a kind of echo of the fight to legalize cremation in the mid-20th century. Here we are essentially 70 years later, still in a sense battling, legally battling for the right to cremate all over again during the pandemic. The last thing I'll say is that the first Indo-Trinbagonian Prime Minister, Basdeo Panday, who was prime minister the second half of the 90s. He died at the beginning of 2024. And of course, that was a high profile event. But his daughter, Michaela Panday, helped carry the casket to the pyre and light the pyre. And that sort of instigated a sort of flurry of discussion and debate and a bit of controversy around the question of women as primary officiants in the practice of pyrocyte cremation. And there's a very robust sort of debate within the Hindu community about the status of women in that regard. Many people think it's totally fine and not a problem. And then you have other people, sort of more kind of neo-traditionalist types, who claim that it really should be men, enacting this role and sort of digging in their heels about that. But it's become, it's always been a sort of issue that's been sort of bubbling, but it has, in a sense, it's become increasingly sort of more explicit and increasingly politicized. And the Panday funeral sort of really brought it out into the open, and it became a much more open and lively and contentious debate. Anyway, there's so much to say about this history. I'm going to share this schema in the chat so that you all can grab it and take a look if you want. I ask that people don't circulate this because it's really not ready for, official public consumption yet. But I would love to get feedback on the project, the history, the film, anything, and I'll look forward to Q&A.
Very, very informative, sir. Absolutely intriguing. I can't wait to see the film in its entirety.
Me too.
Thank you very much.
We've been doing it without a budget, so it's quite an uphill struggle to do something like that without much funding. So
yeah, and going really well so far, I have to say. So I want to thank you very much. I want to ask members of the audience, please hold with your questions, but you can always put them in the chat if you would like, because you may not remember when we do get into the Q&A, which will be at the end of all three presentations. So at this point in time, I want to move on to our second presenter, and this is Nirmala Bibi Maharaj from right here in Trinidad. She's one of the few female pundits assistants, or nows. She's 41 years old and therefore perhaps one of the youngest nows in Trinidad. She has worked for almost 26 years, assisting with funerals, weddings, and other Hindu ceremonies. Welcome, Nirmala.
Thank you very much, and hello to everyone.
Go ahead with your presentation, please.
Okay, well, for funeral rites and rituals, when death takes place in a Hindu home, everything starts immediately. All rituals and rites according to Hinduism, it starts immediately upon hearing of a death. Once there is a death in the home, the sons, grandsons, the male relatives of the deceased, the first thing they do is to shave their heads. And after that, it is light a diya where in the person's room where they used to sleep. So this is my work in guiding people along as to everything that they're supposed to do when it comes to the rites and the rituals of the deceased person. So from there, the other members of the family will do all the legal paperwork into getting the process of the funeral rites finished at the cremation site. From there, the date will be set for the funeral, and on the funeral day, the pundit will come. And the funeral ceremony is basically preparing the dead because your body is made up of 5 elements. And from there, by using cremation rites, the elements go back faster where they come from. From that now, the next day after the funeral, the boys or girls, sometimes as Dr. Keith said just now, there are ladies who take part and do it as well. So from there, they go back to clean up the ashes, to dispose of the ashes. And as the Christians, they say, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, I now return you to your maker. So too with the Hindus, we take up some of the ashes and we scatter it into the sea. That is, most of the time, we use the Mosquito Creek, the shore of peace in San Fernando. And then from there, it will take us into the 10 days. From the funeral day to the 10th day, there are a lot of offerings that needs to be made so that the body, the soul can rest. The rice balls offerings are called the pindas. So the day after the funeral, these pindas are offered along with some tilangeli, which is usually water, white rice, black till, and white flowers. So these are offered facing in a southern direction at the home. This water is offered on the grass. You offer a pinda, which is the rice ball. You're made up of grind rice, grind urdi, honey, ghee, and black till. So you make it in a little bowl and you offer. You light a diya with mustard oil, and you also light an incense. And you just say a simple prayer, wishing the dead well on their journey. You do this straight up until the shaving day, the Dasgat, which is called the 10th day ceremony. So from here, there's a pundit that is called the Mahapat. He is the one that is specialized in doing these types of prayers. Usually you do it by a river or by the beach. Some of them, they go to a pond. If it depends on the weather or the availability of the person or the wherever they live, the convenience, sometimes they have to make it easy for them. So most of the time we go to beaches or rivers or to woodland, right here in Trinidad. And from there now, the Mahapat will guide them along into offering 10 pindas. Those pindas is usually form an astral body for the soul to begin its journey. So every day the pindas that the people at home would have been offering, these pindas are now offered with prayers through the Mahapat. And when on returning home, they are asked to do certain rites and rituals again. So they give the Mahapat, this give them a lot of water. So you go to sprinkle the home to start to purify the house. So that from there the house will start to come back to normalcy. And when they cook food, the food is not supposed to be tasted. So 5 shares of food are taken out. So we offer these foods in the name of the departed, one for the ants, one for the birds, one for the dog, one for the cow, so that wherever, once there is birth, there is death, and you have to be reborn again. So whichever life form that the soul may go into, you make an offering unto them, so they will have something. From there now, after the shaving day is finished, 2 or 3 days later is called the Bandara day. On this day, the Panditas come home to do the puja. So on the outside of the home, you build a long bedi. Some people they say that how the bedi is like a body, but it's not a body, it's a bedi. They just say the head and the body, but it's 2 parts of a bedi. One is used for the sapinda, that is the joining of the deceased person with their ancestors. And the others are offered to the different types of deotas. Because when you die from the Bandara, they go straight up until the 1 year period. You have to pass through 16 different cities. Sometimes the one hot, one cold, it really, you're hungry, it have no water. So these are some of the things that they offer when they do the prayers for the Bandara Day, like a gift of an umbrella, a slippers, a sponge, a sheet, pillow. These are things to help comfort the soul on their journey. After the bandara is finished, well, the people in the house, they can now go back to the lighting of their diyas as how they used to be on a normal daily basis, because the period of the impurity in the home would have been lifted now. So and once for the month, sometimes the pundits will guide you and say on new moon day, you should offer a pinda for the departed ones. So when you offer that pinda, it will help them on their journey. And this goes on straight up until 11 or 11 and a half months, where on the 11th and a half months, you will do the final prayer for them, which is a 1 year prayer. That is the final bandara. So after this, the soul now graduates and become a pitri. When it now die, you call it a prit, and after that, it's called a pitri. So from there, that departed soul will join the ancestors of their lineage. And from there, well, it's up to you to keep doing it. As Dr. Keith would have said during the Pitri Paksh times, we remember our ancestors. They have 15 days to remember them, to make offerings to them. So the more you do it, the more you remember your ancestors, the more they bless you, the more you will have. And when you die, at least you will have a place to go when you meet up with them. So that's it from me for now.
Very, very interesting, Nirmala. I have a few questions for you, but I too need to hold those until after all the presentations. Thank you very much for what you've shared so far. I'm sure members of the audience would also like to ask some questions.
I am anxiously awaiting.
Thank you. So let me just bring our third speaker. We've heard from both Professor McNeil and Nirmala Maharaj about Hindu rites and rituals, and we'll now hear something from a Muslim. This is Imam Riaz Shah. He has served as an imam and resident alim in various masjids across Trinidad. He's lectured at the Haji Ruknuddin Institute of Islamic Studies, and he's also the host of the daily Assalam program on Sangeet 106.1 FM. It's a pleasure to have you, Imam Shah. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the invite, and I do appreciate such wonderful opportunity.
Walaikum salam.
All right. Yes. So this here, I, tried to put together, a PowerPoint presentation. So let's hope we get it okay, inshallah. All right. So Islamic funeral rites. Now, as a Muslim, it is very simple and straightforward when we, take care of our dead and we bury our deceased. It is a process that starts very simple and it's very easy to follow, inshallah. So, dear sister, could you change the next one? Right, so these are the topics I would like to go through. The moment the person passes, the preparation, that would be the bathing and the shrouding of the deceased. Then the Salatul Janaza, how we actually pray before we bury the person into the hole. Then you have the types of graves that are dug. Then you have post-burial practices, which includes 3 days, 40 days, 1 year, and Sadqatul Jariyah, inshallah. So I will try to go through these topics in the few minutes that we have, inshallah. Next slide, please. All right, so my name, I am Maulana Riaz Shah. I graduated in 2004 from the Islamic Institute of Studies in Dewsbury, England. And since I have been serving as imams in various places, and currently I'm the imam of the Kuti Sardar Memorial Mosque in California, Trinidad. The reason I make sure and put Trinidad is because people ask me, if it's America, I'm serving in. Right? So that is why I made sure I put the word, Trinidad after there. So it is in Trinidad, down California, Point Lisas area, inshallah. Next slide. Right, so in Quran, there's this ayah, Kullu nafsin dha'ikatul maut. Every soul shall taste of death. No matter which walk of life we are from, whether we be Muslim, whether we be Hindu, whether we be Christian, or we don't believe in any faith at all, it is that every soul shall taste of death. So it is important that the time that we are given whilst we are here upon the face of the earth, we all have different tastes that we enjoy. And, my Jamaat members, I always mention this to them. And it is that we all, like, for example, we go to buy doubles and we enjoy different tastes. Some of us like, the bandania sauce, some of like, the roast sauce, some like the cucumber sauce. We all have different acquired tastes that we enjoy. So we are given the opportunity to prepare ourselves for that day, how we would like our death to be, what experience we would like. We have that opportunity throughout our lives to prepare for that final moment. Next slide, inshallah. Right. What to do firstly? Upon the death of someone, a Muslim, the first thing, we ensure that the person has passed, whether it be that, we ourselves check and see, or we get a medical professional to ensure, but we ensure that the person has passed. Secondly, we then, as the person passes, sometimes the eyes remain open and so on. So we gently close the eye. We straighten the limbs because it is still, soft and so on. So we could straighten it and, supposing the person, whilst they probably died while sleeping or something. So you could straighten the limbs and you set the person straight. And sometimes, from the mouth, liquids would overflow. So you tie the mouth with a piece of cloth to prevent that from happening. Then even after now, you cover the body completely with a sheet of cloth, and you make dua for the deceased person, or dua for forgiveness. You ask Allah to forgive the person, make things easy for them, and so on. So you make dua of forgiveness for the deceased person. Fifth, now you inform family members, like his brother, his sisters, and so on. You inform who you have to inform, and then you make preparation for burial, for bathing and shrouding. It is sunnah and it is, an Islamic practice to hasten the burial of the deceased. Because just as, you cannot slow and prevent a child from being born, it is believed and understood that passing and dying is like that time that you would now be leaving this world and you are entering into the hereafter. So to prevent and delay that person's entrance into the hereafter is not correct. So that is why it is, mostly suggested that you try to bury that person within 24 hours. If, for some reason or the other, maybe, let's say, have to do autopsy or so some medical reason, sometimes, people ask, well, Imam, he have a son coming from America, he wants to be here for the funeral. Well, then, you give that leeway that to allow that person to arrive, or the case may be accordingly. But as per usual, and the best practice is that you try to bury that person within 24 hours or as soon as possible, inshallah. Next slide. Right, bathing the deceased. Now, in Islam, we try to ensure that who is bathing the deceased should be of the same gender. If it's a male, when men should bathe the deceased. If it's a female, then women should bathe the deceased. Bathing that person now, we use warm water, we use soap, and loth leaves. Now, in Trinidad, we mostly use the dung leaves. So that would, how to say it, give a fragrance to the water, and that is what we would use. You have now cotton that would be used to wash the body with. Sponges, you could use that also, and gloves. So the person now, the person who is doing the bathing, they would wear gloves to bathe the person all times. Camphorated water, you use camphor to, scent the water. So you are now rinsing the body in the final stage with that camphorated water as a means of, not having any foul scent emanating from the body. And then you dry the body when you are finished. You will rest the body. You can now, if you don't have a built elevated area, you could rest it on a bench, you could rest it on, a table, like the 6-foot long table or so, you rest it on that to do the bathing. Bathing actual now, the body should be covered at all times. Now you have the deceased body and you take a long sheet and you cover the body. So that cloth now would be raised by 4 people from the 4 different corners, and the person who is actually doing the bathing, they would remove the clothes that that person was wearing in an effort now, you're keeping everything covered still so that the person is not exposed in the state of nudity. Even after the death, this is not correct that the dead body, is left in a nude state on a table or anything like that. No, the body should be covered at all times. Then we say Bismillah in the name of Allah before we start bathing. So now that person who is doing the bathing, he will actually raise the body up a little bit, or you raise the upper half of the body as much as possible to remove any impurities that may still be wanting to come out, like that may be excreta or whatever, that will come out. So you could, when you are finally washing the body now, everything will be clean by the time you are finished. Now, then after that, you would perform wudu on the deceased person, that is ablution. You wash the face, you wash the hands, the arms, and then you wipe the head, and finally you wash the feet. The entire body is then washed from the head to the foot. Everything is washed properly. And the way you are doing it, you wash the person will be lying on the back. So you wash the top, the belly, the upper half first. The body, the upper piece first, then, right? There'll be the head, the belly, the foot, that area first. Then you turn it on the side, on the right side. So you wash this way, you wash the right side second. Then you turn it again and you wash the left side, and you wash the back and so on. You wash everything properly and you wash the entire body. The sunnah would be 3 times. So you wash once with water and soap, then you wash with clean water, and then you rinse with camphorated infused water. A body could be washed, 5 or 7 times, but it should be done odd number of times. This is, a sunnah in Islam, a practice in Islam that you use odd number of times then. So that way it could be the 3, 5, 7 accordingly. And then finally, after washing the body, you would dry the body with a clean towel. All right, next slide, inshallah. Now, shrouding the body. For a male person, there would be 3 pieces of cloth. The undergarment, that would be touching the body itself for the male. The kurta. Now, the kurta now is you take a long piece of cloth and, the length of the person then. So when you fold that cloth in half, at the center there, you would make a slit so that the head would go through that hole, and it would be, equal amounts of cloth on either side of the person, just as how you would have a kurta normally that, we wear here in Trinidad. Both Muslims and Hindu wear kurtas, so that is why I use the word kurta, so we would understand both sides, right? Then you have the lifafa, the outer sheet. This would be that where you would finally wrap the entire body completely, and you would cover from head to toe, everything would be completely covered. That would be 3 pieces of cloth for the men. Ladies now would use 5 pieces of cloth, 2 extra. These 3 that the izhar, the undergarment, the kurta, and the lifafa, and ladies would have 2 extra pieces. One now would be used to cover, the head, and the second extra piece would be the piece that would be used to cover, the chest area. But again, all of these cloth would be, like, for example, the one that covering the head, it would be, long enough to cover from the head to the foot. Then you have, the piece that is covering the chest. So that would be mostly from the neck to right down below. And then you have the kurta also that would come over the chest band. And then you would have the final entire body enveloping the piece of cloth that would cover the entire body. Lifafa could mean, like an envelope. So it would cover the entire body from top to foot. Everything would be covered completely, right? All cloth should be white, clean, and unscented. The sheets, you know, you would lay it down in such a manner that you would have the lifafa first that would be flat on the elevated area that you are using, or the ground, whatever that is available. So the lifafa would be first on the ground. So let's, you know, dress the male. So your lifafa would be on the ground. Then on top of that, now you would have the kurta, and then on top of that, you would have the izar, the undergarment. So when you rest the male onto the undergarment there, you wrap that first onto the body in such a manner that you put the left side first and then you cover with the right side. So then after that also now, oops, we forget out something. Apply light fragrance to the parts of the body that would have touched the ground while prostrating in sajda. So when we bow down to pray, the areas that would normally touch the ground while we are praying, while we are in sajda, on those areas you would put some scent. So that would be the forehead, it would be the hands, the both palms here, all right? Then it will be the knees, okay? And then we'll be down, you know, down by the toes area down there. So you write down everything here. The forehead, the nose, right? The nose also touches the ground, the hands, the knees, and the feet, right? So these areas touch the ground, so we would put some light scent on it also. Now, when we are wrapping the body, right? Like I was saying, you put the lifafa, which would be the enveloping, and the covering sheet that would be on last. Then you, on top of that, now you would have, you know, for the ladies, then and the male, you would have the kurta. And then for the men, you would have the izar. And on top of that, now you have the two extra pieces for the ladies. So you put the chest cloth, that will be the fourth there. And then you put the headpiece, the headscarf. So you cover the head, come down. Then you pull across the chest cloth, the chest wrap for the ladies. And then you would pull across the izar to cover there. The izar normally, you know, yes, it runs from the neck and the shoulders straight down. So that will also be pulled across. Then you would pull across the kurta, and then you would cover with the lifafa, the final sheet of cloth to cover the entire body. And then in the end now you tie it with strips of cloth. The end, you know, down there to the feet area, you tie it with a strip of cloth that would be easy to lose, when it is placed in the hole. And then also to the top area here, you tie a loose piece of cloth, also a loose knot that will also be loosed when the body is placed into the grave. Now, in Islam, we do not use any sewn clothes to bury our deceased, may it be a tuxedo or whether it be a shirt and pants, no. No sewn cloth is used to bury the deceased in Islam. The reason for that is simple because, as we would say, in the grave there now, the body is made to sit up. So if we were to put sewn clothes onto the deceased, it would be difficult for them to sit up. And you leave it that it is loose for them to be able to sit up whilst in the grave. Now, yes, you know, a person may ask the question, but the person is dead. The person is no more. They cannot sit up. In Islam, we understand and we were taught that the soul is returned to the body, and they are made to wake up and sit up to answer questions that would be asked there in the grave at that time. Now, I have been to funerals where they say that, you know, that the person asked to be burned after dying. So we had to read janaza and the person was taken to be burned. Now in Islam, burning is not part of our belief. As far as we have been taught in Islam and, you know, the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ, it is that fire is used for punishment according to our beliefs. No disrespect to anyone else's beliefs. But in Islam, fire is used for punishment. And that level of punishment is left only for Allah to do. So for us to burn our deceased is not correct. It's wrong for us to burn our deceased in Islam then, right? Right. Next slide, please. Right. Janaza Salah, the funeral prayer. This is now performed very simple. We would perform standing without bowing or prostration. The body should be placed on the ground in front of the imam. The body of a male the imam should stand in line with the head, and for the body of a female, the imam should be in line with the chest area. Now, performing the janaza salah, that body, we would take it now and rest it on the ground. And like mentioned here, it is closed. The body is totally covered up and not reopened again. You know, sometimes people, you know, they say, Imam, well, they have two family members, they're running late, they come in, just read the janaza, and then, you know, we go let them see the body when they reach by the cemetery. No. In Islam, when we finish read the janaza, and we close the body before the janaza salah. So once it's closed, we are not allowed to open it again. It's final there now. When you read janaza, we bury them immediately. So I have to wait and so on for them to reach, and then, you know, let them see, and then we perform the janaza salah. So performing the janaza salah is not that we are praying to the dead. It is a form of dua, a form of prayer, asking Allah to forgive the deceased and so on. So janaza salah is such that we make intention to follow the imam performing janaza salah, the last rites of the deceased. The imam would say Allahu Akbar, and then, you know, all the followers would say Allahu Akbar also, and we recite the thana, which is a small dua that is read upon starting salah. Then the imam would say Allahu Akbar again. Everyone say Allahu Akbar and recite Darood on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is a form of prayer for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thirdly, we make dua for the deceased, and that dua, you know, it has many different variations. But the basic idea of all of the variations is that we make dua for the forgiveness. We ask forgiveness on behalf of the deceased. And then fourth, if someone, you know, before takbir, is the imam will say Allahu Akbar for the fourth time, you finish up the duas that you are reciting, and then we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First time turning the head to the right, and then turn the head to the left, and janaza salah is complete. There now, some people, you know, they make dua again, asking again for forgiveness for the person. And some people don't make dua. It's a difference of opinion. It's neither here nor there. But, you know, I mean, making and praying for the deceased is always good. So it is done. Some people do it, some people don't do it. Next slide. Right. Now, the types of graves that are dug. Two different types are dug. You have the lahad, that the grave is dug. Now, when we dig our graves, it is dug in such a manner that the body would be able to lie on its right side, facing, you know, the Qibla. Qibla is the direction that we pray in, facing the Kaaba. So in Saudi Arabia there. So the grave is dug in such a manner that the head, well, here in Trinidad, the head would be in the south and the feet would be in the north, and the body would be facing towards the Qibla, lying on the right side, facing east in Trinidad, because that is our Qibla in Trinidad, more or less, right? So the grave is dug in such a way that it comes down the lahad niche, side niche. I don't know why I pressed nosh, you know, probably when I was typing it, it came up noch, but it's niche, sorry, that on the the side that is on the Qibla side then, right? You come down and you dig a pocket into the wall. All right, you dig a pocket into the wall, whether it be square or angled, however, but you dig a pocket into the wall on the Qibla side, that is the side that is closer to the Qibla side, right? So you dig a pocket into the wall and you place the body into that pocket, and you cover off that area now using board or wood or clay bricks, not the burnt kind, not the baked one, just the one that was made and dried in the sun. Unbaked bricks then, right? And you use that to cover off that, and the body is left in there, and then you fill up the hole with dirt. In Trinidad, we don't really use that style because the dirt will cave down and squish the body, so that is why we don't use that most times in Trinidad. The one that we use in Trinidad mostly is the shap, the central trench, that it is dug straight down, and then a ledge is made, and then you dig straight down again. And in that middle area there now, the body is placed, and on the ledge here, you put board to cover the deceased. So when we throw the dirt on top, it doesn't hit the body down below there. Now, the Sunnah method and the most preferred method is that the body is placed in the ground, on the ground, just like that, without a box. But due to certain circumstances, sometimes, the grave is really wet, so some grass is placed, then the body is rest. Or sometimes some people use the box itself, and in certain instances, due to certain medical reasons, a closed box can be used for medical reasons. Yes, maybe the person was burnt, or the body is swollen, or something like that. Yes, the body can be placed in a box and then buried because of different reasons that is not normal. Once it's a normal death and there isn't any issues, then the correct and the most preferred method is that the body is placed on the ground, dirt, on the dirt itself. If it's extremely wet, then we place some grass and then place the body. Or if it's extremely bad, then we use the box. Right? Next slide. Post-burial practices. Now, optional, not compulsory. After that, it is, recommended that we continue praying for the forgiveness of deceased family members. It doesn't have to be for just, the one that has passed away. It can be for parents, grandparents, aunt, uncles, all deceased family members, and it can also be for all deceased Muslims, right? Now the question may arise, in Trinidad, we have the cultural practice of having 3 days, 40 days, and 1 year functions. Now, like we mentioned here, it's not compulsory, right? It doesn't have to be done. The important thing is we pray for the deceased. We send, blessings, and we send prayers and du'as for the deceased. Now that could take many different forms. In normal 3 days, 40 days, and 1 year functions in Trinidad, Quran will be recited, du'as are made for mercy and forgiveness for the deceased, charities are given, people are fed, and so on. So things are done on behalf of the deceased in a manner to seek mercies and forgiveness for the one who has passed away. All right. Now, the next thing that I wrote there is Sadqatul Jariyah, a continuous charity that it gives itself over and over. Now that could be in many different ways. You can build a masjid on behalf of the deceased. You can help an orphanage on behalf of the deceased. You can give a Quran on behalf of the deceased. Any good form, any good action, any form of charity can be done on behalf of the deceased. The best form that can be done for a deceased person, the best sadqatul jariyah, the best continuous charity, is for us, whilst we are alive, is that we make our children pious, we make them righteous, so that every time they would pray, every time they would make dua, whilst we are in our graves, we would still be receiving that blessings and rewards from that. All right. Building a masjid, for example. That masjid, like for example, the Masjid Nabawi, the Prophet's masjid in Medina in Arabia, the person who would have given that land to build that masjid on, that was 1400 years ago. So until today, that person, he is receiving rewards from that charity that he gave 1400 plus years ago. So giving that charity, making that charity on behalf of our deceased, is a manner in which that person continues to receive rewards and blessings many years, many eons after passing. I hope, this would have been, as to say, enough for understanding, inshallah. And if there may be any questions, I would try my best to answer it. If not, I would leave, you can contact me after, and I'll try my best to give an explanation, inshallah. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Maulana Riaz. While you were presenting there, I could not help but remember being there for my own mother's rituals with my sisters, and being at Shyam's funeral home, doing the needful. Thank you very much for your presentation. I do have a question for you, but I want to also invite members of the audience. At this point in time, we will take questions for all three presenters. So I'll ask you to please raise your electronic hand, which you will find in the reactions button at the base of your screen. Just click on the reactions button, you will see a raised hand, click on that, and then I will call upon you so that you can ask your question directly. I will also look at the chat and take questions from there. Maulana, could you please just give us a response to this? When Nirmala spoke, she mentioned a period of impurity following death. Is there a period of impurity in Islam after the death of a family member?
No. No period of impurity. No period of impurity.
So post-funeral, members of the family can simply go on to doing things that they normally would.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Secondly, in regard to the 3 days, 40 days, and 1 year,
Yeah.
is that a practice which had come with the indentures following Hindu practices and has changed with the Arabization of Islam in the Caribbean? Would you agree?
Probably yes, you can say that, because remember, when Islam would have left these, left Arabia and so on, it came to different countries, and they would have wanted to continue and do certain things for their deceased also, right? So 3 days, 40 days, and 1 year. It is that probably that is where it came from. To give you an exact answer, I cannot say, but it is possible that that is where it came from. So there is nothing wrong if a person wants to do it, because you are, reciting Quran, you are making dua, you are giving charity on behalf of the deceased, right? And you would find that, I think, more or less, for me personally, when my grandmother had passed away, my father's mother, I saw it in him that it was a period in which he was able to soothe himself then. We would all gather, we would recite Quran, we would make dua. And over that period of time, I saw that he was able to soothe and able to recover from, the emotions that he would have experienced, right? So that is why I do not, put it down or say that it's totally forbidden to do that, because you have to allow people to soothe, you have to allow people to heal then over this period of time, and it works well that they are able to do something that they feel that they would have sent some form of blessings and mercies for their deceased family members then.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Professor McNeil, you wanted to add to that?
Oh, no, I just was chiming in on the chat to just say that the practice of 40-day observances is quite common across many different religious traditions in TNT. I gave the example of a 40-day Baptist Thanksgiving, or sometimes yards who who make Jose. There's a 40-day Jose sometimes as well. So 40 days is an interesting sort of almost universal religious sort of schema, like an underlying something in TNT.
Something to do with number 40.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it crosses both Abrahamic faiths as well as non-Abrahamic faiths such as Hinduism. So there's more to the 40 days than maybe it's an area for investigation, Professor McNeil. Ken Selene has his hand up. Ken, go ahead, please, with your question.
Yes, my question had to do with the 40 days, because I can remember in St. Vincent, we have a very small Indian population, but that was one of the traditions. When my grandfather died, they had a 40-day prayer, and only vegetarian food is served. And it is a very, prayerful type of meeting. We were told it was to signify the end of the mourning period. But I'm just learning now that these other traditions also have the 40 days. So I think you answered my question in that it is across different religions, but also I was also told that Jesus, after he was crucified, was on earth for 40 days until he rose into heaven. So maybe it comes from that as well. So that was my question.
Thank you. Let's take a question from Suresh. Welcome, Suresh. Can you unmute your mic?
My apologies. I'm not a very technical person like you. Namaste and salam alaikum to everyone. I was very impressed by the talk by the Imam. Such a humble and open-minded person. I just can't admire him. Turning to these 40 days and many other things, there bound to be some overlaps between religion, faith, and culture. I'm in England, so a lot of things that Hindus now do is not a traditional Hindu, so to speak, yeah, but they adapted from the English culture. And there's nothing wrong at all whatsoever. We are a part of the wider community and we learn and share from each other, and that is perfectly fine. 40 days is very significant, but isn't it true, Shalimaji, Mary Bahan, right? That whether it's Hindu, Muslim, Christianity, or whatever calendar you take, we all have the 7 days on that. So there is something that unites us. That is something that is common among all humanity, including Imam, what he said, and I'm really touched by Imam humble, yeah, that even non-believers, that's fine. Yeah. So we do the things more for our own peace of mind and for closer than the departed stuff. That's all I want to share with you. Thank you very much for giving me the chance.
Yeah, thank you. So, Imam, do you agree? Suresh, I'm sorry, did you finish your contribution?
I have indeed, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Maulana Shah, do you believe or do you agree that the 3 days, the 40 days, and the 1 year might really have been more for the family members rather? So it's psychological for family
Yes, it's
members.
a period where, they are able to soothe, they are able to mourn, they are able to, regain their stability then in a effort, to accept what has happened, right? Because I mean,
Absolutely.
to lose a loved one, the feeling never goes. All right. My mom up to now, at times, in different instances, she would still cry for my dad. All right. So it is that, it is a period where I think, we are able, not only us as Muslims, but, across the board, people are able to bring themselves back into some form of stability and able to move on then.
Right. Thank you.
I couldn't
Dr.
agree more.
Mahabir?
Right. So I would direct my question to any of the three speakers. We talk about prohibition, right? That is there any particular food that should not be consumed or drink, not mentioning alcohol during this period of mourning? And the second question about women taking part in these rituals and these ceremonies. And in fact, to the extent that I know long ago, women were not even allowed or encouraged to go to the cemetery. So
Yes.
anybody can answer
So
that.
I would take, the question about the ladies going to cemetery. It is, recommended and it is highly, stressed that ladies should not go to the cemetery. I mean, yes, today now you see, people go, all right, and they attend, but it is highly recommended that ladies not go to the cemetery. One saying of the Prophet ﷺ is that when a lady would leave home with the intention of going to the cemetery, the shaitan, the devil, he sits on their heads and direct people to look at them, and it causes problems for them. So that is why it is highly recommended for them not to go. Today, some scholars, they give permission on the with the condition, sorry, with the condition that when they go there, they do not, allow themselves to become over remorseful, meaning that they do not, throw their hands up and they start crying loudly and, going along those lines then. So if, they are able to control their emotions, in that instant, permission is given. But still, it is recommended not to go to the cemetery.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nirmala, let's hear from you as a now. What is
Yes.
your role at the cremation site or burial site if a Hindu is choosing to bury, which is uncommon in the modern times, but still quite possible?
Yeah. Well, most people believe that when you cremate, you send back the elements of your body faster. And the Gurul Quran do give allowances for females to take part, but they leave them as a last resort. So you start with the sons, the grandsons. If the person that died has no family, a villager can do it, the priest, the presiding person can do it, an outsider can do it. And if it have absolutely no one, then the permission is given to a female to do that right. So females do have rights.
Right, and female family members, members of the neighbors, the villagers, extended family, and so on. What is their role at the funeral? Females.
Well, their rights, the daughter-in-law, before the deceased leave, the daughter-in-law just walk around the box 7 times. That is to break her ties with the family. Other to that, the daughters and them, they can pay their last respects, offer their flowers, everything that they want to do before the deceased leave. They can also go to the cremation site. But most of the time, they leave a neighbor home because somebody just have to stay home in the house for when they come back. Because on the outside, we put a little fire, some gobar, which is to purify, a knife, some saffron, and some doom. So when you come back home now, this is to purify yourself from the cremation site before you go into the house. So that's why somebody is left at home at all times.
Why would you have to purify yourself after returning from the cremation site?
The cremation site is an unclean place where you have a lot of death, where you have a lot of unwanted spirits, people who haven't moved on after their cremation. Because we have seen where some people, they didn't get a last rites after the cremation. So sometimes if you have little children, you see that they're crying and things bothering them that they can't sleep. They come to the priest. So this is some of the things that we pass through on a daily basis.
I see. So there's some, again, Professor McNeil, let's hear from you.
About this topic?
About this topic.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of having the whole process is to move through this, this kind of liminal period betwixt and between life and death, the funeral after the funeral. So the rituals are there to support and move everyone and everything, including the pret, to move things forward. And I mean, we can think of impurity in a sense as like also an allegory or symbolic of this, this turbulent time and moving people through this impure time to get to, to reestablish life, the family, and, the breach that the death caused for everyone. I was going to also say that in response to Dr. Mahabir's comment, yeah, there are several, in particular, there are 2 really important anthropological accounts of Indian communities in Felicity and then Orapuch in South Trinidad from the 1940s and 1950s. And both of them attest to the prohibition of women. Women would basically would attend the funeral procession all the way up to the entrance of the cemetery, and then they would stop there, and then it would just be males who would enter the cemetery and do the, inter the body and perform the rites around the burial. So yeah, things have changed. Things are always changing, right?
Yeah.
Well, not everything, but some things are changing while other things are staying, continuous. And there's a really interesting interplay between continuity and change.
Yeah. Suresh Bhai, you had your hand up again. I wonder if you had a second question.
Excuse me. Pardon me.
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Pardon me. There is no religious injunction why women cannot enter the crematorium. It was more for emotional, because women were regarded in older days as emotionally weaker. They would cry, they wouldn't be able to hold their feeling. So that's why they were not allowed. But there's no religious issue. That's the first thing. Now, and the other thing is that because in olden days, as we all know, the funeral, the cremation was done in an open ground where you can see the burning and everything. Now in England, again, I can only talk about that. And in India, now things have changed. Now it's in a closed thing. Nobody can see it, everything. Women take part in everything, right from all things. Women may stay at home because some unexpected visitors come or to look after the children, but women are not really bad as such. It's just a social and cultural thing more than anything else. Purification, why they have a bath or purify, not because there's any impurities, but the whole cremation or burial is a very sad experience, regardless of faith and everything. So when you come home, have a shower, you feel fresh, and that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I have another question. Right, Nirmala, can you please say whether there are any differences in the rituals when a family member dies at home as opposed to at a medical institution, for example?
No, it doesn't really have a difference. If they died like in a hospital, the funeral home takes the body from there. And then after that, well, the legal paperwork is finished until the funeral day where the body comes at your home. It is your choice if you want the body to come by your home and then to the cremation site, or you put it straight in the cremation site and you can do all your rites and rituals there. Or some of the cremation home these days, they have their own crematorium. So they have options.
I just want to ask Uncle Bobby Piramal, can you please unmute? I just want to get a sense of what it was like in South Africa back in the day, not modern days, but maybe 50 years ago or so when an Indian person dies. Maybe it could be Hindu or Muslim or Christian, it doesn't matter. Was there a difference in terms of what happened at the home of the deceased? Uncle Bobby, can you unmute your mic, please? Or is Roy and Anisha here?
Anissa, yeah, Roy, yes, they're here.
You can hear me?
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
we're
go
hearing
ahead.
you now.
Thank you. Just repeat that part of the question. I didn't quite get you. I'm slightly deaf. Just
Sure.
repeat that to me, please.
Uncle Bobby, I'm just trying to get a sense of what used to be the practice at the home of the deceased if someone died at home, as
Yeah,
opposed to at a medical institution. So what
right.
happened in South Africa about 50 years ago?
Well, look, when somebody passed on, if they passed on at the hospital, then the normal procedure, the funeral don't take place at the hospital. From the hospital, the undertakers will take away to their mortuary, and then, according to religious rites, they'll do the necessary ceremonies, and normally in a day or two, they will cremate or bury. But nowadays, because people live in all parts of the country, it's not always possible. Sometimes some members of the family are away in overseas or whatever the case may be. So some parents wait for them to come. When the children come down, it could even take 3-4 days. I know of a number of cases. But in the olden days, the funerals took place immediately after, a day later after they pass on. But things are changing gradually. And, we just have to follow the tradition according to times and the changes that are coming along.
Right, but did anything special have to happen at the home of the deceased? Any particular rituals or practices had to happen at the home?
At all, yes. Well, look, they have what is known as a yegium, where they ask for forgiveness, that the family hopes to get the people sort of understand that we are now sending off this deceased, and we pray to Almighty that God must forgive for whatever sins, whatever wrongs have been done in the past, and that the family must have the courage and strength to overcome this irreparable loss. That is the crux of the whole thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Mahabir.
Okay, so I have asked about women and about the food and drinks that are prohibited. Generally, children are not allowed to go to the cemetery, but I recall seeing, in the rare cases, I recall seeing children and they were maybe some kind of ritual. They were passed over the opening of the grave. So I don't know if anybody, Nirmala or anybody, has any
Yes,
explanation.
I will answer that. Most of the time, when you pass the little child over the box, is because of tradition or folk customs that they will say that that's for jumping not to follow the child.
So we're coming back to spirits then, basically.
Yes, sometimes they say things to frighten little children, so you wouldn't go in the cemetery. Yeah, a zombie go follow you. That's like basically I'm saying to frighten up anybody.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Professor McNeil, you wanted to share some further information which you had.
I see Dr. Mahabir with a hand up. Do you have?
Dr. Mahabir, you still need to ask a question?
Do you want me to? So yes.
No, your hand is still up, so we were curious.
Yes. So Hindus believe in reincarnation. I think there are various ways in which families can indicate some indication, some sign in which the soul has been reincarnated. And I hear about the shape of ashes or something like that. Maybe Keith or BB can throw some light at that.
Normal.
Yes. Sometimes people they say that when you die, they just put flower by the doorstep. So whatever footprint you see, they just come back like as that. So if you see a dog footprint or a butterfly, you know they come back as a butterfly. But sometimes and also when you have family members, especially the women, if they get pregnant before the 1 year, the baby that they make, either a boy or a girl, sometimes it resembles the deceased person. So they just say, "Look, mama, come back," or "Look,
So an
daddy, come
assumption
back."
is made then that
Yes,
an assumption is made that the deceased has reincarnated.
yes.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's hear from Professor McNeil.
What is the question, or what are you interested in hearing about?
You had some further information that you wanted to share from your presentation.
Oh, I was just alluding to all the different detail, like all the different directions we could go in to talk about aspects of the history, aspects of change, and so on and so forth. I didn't have any one thing in particular in mind. There's just a lot I have that we could discuss, past and present. I could say that in the conversation earlier about traditions carry, the sort of long-term aspects of the traditions, the dimensions of traditions that are in a sense universal within different faiths, except for, there's also the ways that these things get localized right? We were talking about what aspects of the Muslim process are like standard across Islam and what aspects are specific to TNT. One really lovely, I think a really beautiful development within the Caribbean Hindu practice is that certainly by the mid 20th century, the practice of waking had already been adopted by um, uh, Indian folks in Trinidad. I don't know if we can generalize to the entire Caribbean, but certainly in Trinidad, both of these mid 20th century accounts that I referred to, both of them refer to Indian Hindus observing the practice of waking, right? Like waking the dead, which would have been learned from their Black Christian neighbors, and also the practice of All Souls Day, going to the cemetery at the beginning of November and cleaning the grave and lighting up, also is a really beautiful kind of convergent practice where essentially Hindus and Christians, I don't know about Muslims and the extent of Muslim participation in this, so I'm not
So let's hear from Maulana Riaz.
yeah, but Hindus were observing All Souls Day certainly by the mid 20th century, and it seems very ensconced. So it would have been before then, at least a generation before then, that Hindus would have incorporated both waking and the observance of All Souls Day in cemeteries in early November. You saw some footage of that in the, there was a drone shot of the Diaz at graves.
Yes.
That was in South Trinidad. Yeah, it's a really lovely example of, like cultural incorporation into the tradition.
Well, the thing is, you can only do that at the graves of, for example, endangered Indians. Because as you pointed out, once cremations had started, there is no place to go to clean in a cemetery for the average Hindu.
Although Hindus, what I was saying is that Hindus really didn't take up the practice of pyrocyte cremation until really the last quarter of the 20th century. So there were people being buried all the way through the 70s, and really the 80s was the transition from burial, like, the trend was moving toward cremation, and by the 90s, Hindus, we could say as a generalization, were cremating, but that was a really late 20th century development. But you're right. There has to be a grave to clean. You can't observe that practice without
On
a.
the topic of wake in Islam, now, as far as I would have read, the reason wake came about in the past, right, was because back in the day in England, they would have used enamel cups, and the enamel would have given off some kind of chemical reaction when they would have put alcohol in it. So this person would have drank that alcohol, and because of that chemical reaction, he would have looked as if he is dead. So they would keep that person over a period of time to see if he is really dead or not. All right. So that was the idea of wake. Now in Trinidad, the idea of wake is that, we have a gathering, and people would come in support of the family. Now in Islam, in most plenty Muslim homes, you have a wake where they would come, they would read Quran, they would make dua, and they would say, well, when the funeral is and so on. So yes, the wake exercise takes place for Muslims also, and not that it is compulsory or there is something wrong. I mean, if you start to do different things of, drinking alcohol and gambling and all this kind of thing, yes, then that is wrong. Whether it is awake or not, it is, completely wrong in the eyes of Islam for alcohol and gambling, etc. Right? But the exercise of wake, once it is a form of prayer and dua and so on, then there isn't any prohibition there, right? Then the second piece of visiting the cemetery. As a Muslim, it is recommended that we visit the cemetery as often as we can. And the benefit of it and the reason for visiting the cemetery as often as we can is that we are thus reminded that this would be our eventual outcome one day to come. And yes, there is a day that Muslims, do visit the cemetery once per year, as some people do. It is the 15th of Shaban. That would be 15 days average before the start of the month of Ramadan. So it moves throughout the year, as you would know. Ramadan every year is 10 days earlier, right? So just about 15 days before that, you have the 15th night of Shaban. It is a night in which the Prophet ﷺ would have said more or less to the effect that there is many rewards in that night, du'as are accepted, and there are, narrations that where he himself would have visited the cemetery known as Jannatul Baqi in Medina, that is right next to his masjid there in Medina. So there are narrations that he did visit it, but it is nothing compulsory and necessary for a person to visit the cemetery on that night then. It is more recommended that we visit the cemetery as often as we can. Like, for example, on a Thursday night or a Friday, we should visit the cemetery as often as we can. Yeah, that's about it, hopefully. I hope that brings some light, inshallah.
But Maulana, what about All Saints?
Yeah.
Is it a practice for Muslims to visit during All Saints, or perhaps on the death anniversary of the deceased family member?
No, the All Saints night thing, no, there isn't any tradition, or as far as I know, that Muslims visit the cemetery on that night. Now, if a person wishes to visit, their deceased family member on, the death anniversary date, that is up to them. All right, nothing is wrong with that. Also, they can do it. They can go and visit, the person's their deceased family member grave on that day. Nothing is wrong with it. But like I said, it is recommended that we visit the cemetery as often as we can, because as the Prophet ﷺ would have mentioned, is that it is a manner in which we are reminded that this would also be our eventual outcome.
Thank you. Suresh Bhai. You need to unmute, please.
Unmute.
Please unmute.
Unmute, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we are hearing you now.
Okay, sorry about that. My friends, 500 years ago, or so to speak, our ancestors used to ride on the donkey. Then they started riding on the horse, then the bicycle, then the rickshaw. Now we fly on the plane. Societies, people, culture evolve over the period of time. And quite rightly, the Imam friend says, I can't admire him, yeah? Things change. We do the things because it makes us feel good. Whatever is going to happen to the departed soul, you have absolutely no control. But we do it because it's a good thing to do, whether it's a wake ceremony or visiting the graves or whatever it is, because it comforts us. So let's not get too bogged down with the rituals of the whole things. If it helps you move on, that is fine. That's what I'm saying. There's no rights and wrong at all. We all are different. Nobody's right or nobody's wrong. And that's okay. It's okay to be different. But we need to remember that we do it more for our reason than the person who has passed on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And it brings me to another question. Flowers at funerals. What is the Hindu practice? What is the Muslim practice? What is the Christian practice?
Can I go first? As a
Sure.
Muslim, now the flowers in the cemetery, it's not recommended. All right. That, we try to, express, and we try to, advise the family that that same money that they would have used to buy the flowers and so on, if they give it in charity on behalf of the deceased, then the deceased would be receiving rewards also in that sense, right? But if we are there in this in the funeral ceremony, and people come with the flowers, you allow it. Some imams allow it. Some imams ask not to bring it and so on. But if you would have used the money instead now to put on behalf in charity on behalf of the deceased, then they would get rewards and they would get more benefit out of it then. in other words to put it.
Right.
Thank
So the
you.
traditional practice is to not bring flowers.
Yes, it'd be
But
recommended not.
but correct me if I'm wrong. It was a
Yeah.
practice of the Prophet ﷺ to plant a branch or dried branch or something like that. Correct?
Yes, right. That but that the narration on that is that once he was passing by a grave, and he asked his companions to bring a green branch, and he placed it there, and he planted it into the ground, and he said that the reason he did it is because it brought relief to punishment that the person was receiving in the grave. Right now, yes, that is there, but again, you know, that is why it is recommended, in a cemetery, you shouldn't be spraying the grass for it to die and so on. All right, you could cut it and mow it and so on, and you keep it low and so on. Yes, right. But to be burning it or to be spraying it with poison to die for it to dry up and die and so on, it's not recommended. Now again, the flowers, again, money is spent and so on. So, you could use that money still to give in charity on behalf of the deceased then.
What about planting flowers at the grave? For example, on the day of the funeral, after everything is covered up, you put plants there, a nice vining one, like a jump and kiss that will retain its own water. And a couple weeks later, you will see some blooms so that as the grave settles, it looks lovely and it's as if we
Yeah,
remember the dead.
it is okay. Nothing is as far as I know, there's no hard and fast rule against it, and there's no hard and fast rule concerning for it then, right? So if a person does it, I don't think there will be much yay or nay against it. All right. But there are some cemetery keepers who would ask you not to do it because they try to, manage their cemetery in a specific manner and a specific way and so on. So from an Islamic point of view, there is no yay or nay against it or yay for it or anything like that. But I mean, you work probably with the cemetery keeper and so on to suit that.
Yeah.
But there shouldn't be anything wrong with it per se then.
All right. Thank you. Professor McNeil?
Oh, I was just going to mention that I'm very familiar with the Muslim cemetery in El Socorro, which is next to the two Hindu ones. And that one, the Muslim cemetery there never ever has any flowers or anything. And I assumed that meant that, as you said, it's not really recommended or promoted, but you clarified that it's possible. So I'm just wondering if, in a specifically strictly Muslim cemetery like that, there's a rotation. People are being buried and over and
Yes,
over
it's
and over
rotated,
again,
yes.
right? So
Yes.
because it's so active,
Yeah.
it wouldn't really accommodate having like grave site decorations or even tombstones or anything. So I'm wondering if the practice
it's rotated all the time.
Right. So Muslims who do like decorate graves, I'm wondering if that happens in the multi-faith, multi-religious cemeteries like Paradise, or the ones where there's people
Public
from
ones.
all these different faiths.
Yeah.
Is it more common in those cemeteries as opposed to a specifically strictly Muslim only cemetery?
Well, the few public cemeteries I would have visited, I haven't seen that occur also, right? Where, they plant flowers and so on. But like I said, there is no yay or nay against it, for or against, traditions against it. So if someone does it, in the public cemeteries, or let's say they have a private cemetery to themselves and so on, which is not common in Trinidad. But I know in some of these public cemeteries, you have private plots, right? That, a family would have bought that, plot, and they buried there, over time, the father, the grandfather, the son, the grandson. And so you have those private plots. So if someone does it there, probably it would work. All right. But to say that, like I said, there is no yay or nay against, for or against it. If a person does it, well, okay. If a person doesn't do it, it's similarly along the same lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Suresh Bhai, your hand is up.
I can't admire this Imam friend, whoever he is. Look, whatever makes you feel happy, whatever is possible in the circumstances, that's fine. It's the intention rather than action that is more important. Offering flower is more to do with, it's a symbolic gesture of expressing your love, affection, or loss of life. It has nothing to do with more than anything else. Whatever is practical in the circumstances is perfectly fine. We don't want to be slave to a ideology that if you do this, you'll go to heaven, or if you don't do this, you'll go to hell. Whatever makes sense. And this again, I'm going to say this. Imam friend is a full of common sense. Unfortunately, common sense is not very common nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh Bhai. Nirmala, let's get your take on this. Why are flowers so important in Hindu ceremonies for the dead?
Flowers is a representation of love. For Valentine's Day, everybody buying flowers to give to their loved ones. So when their loved one passes away, this is the last thing that they feel that they could do for them, to give them flowers and roses. That's why most of the time you see the whole box is full of flowers. You could barely even see the face. When you reach to the cremation site now, the flowers, it depends on the pundit. This part depends on the pundit, right? Some of them, they say you can leave the flowers there in the box because you don't give them it already, so don't take it out. While other pundits will take all the flowers and then they will carry it and put it in the sea. So that part depends on the pundit. Some of them will tell you that's how you don't burn flowers. The next one will say, you don't put it there already, burn it and leave it. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. Suresh, your hand is up again.
Sorry, my friend. My apologies. I'm not a very technical person. Just give me a second. Right. And like again, I can't say this, Imam friend, that in England, it's a normal practice. The say if somebody died of cancer, so to speak, or heart disease, yeah, then they'll say, please don't bring the flowers. Offer the same money to the charity, whether it's a cancer charity or a heart foundation, and that's perfectly okay. It is common sense and what is right thing in the circumstances. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've gotten a lot of food for thought out of today's program. And I also see in the chat, Chand is giving us a lot of information, which I hope you all would look at. And Chand, it's very interesting to me that you've been talking a lot about the Hindu rituals and so on. Yes, you are, yet you are following Christianity while you are in the US. But I'm so pleased to see that you are sharing all of this information, and it's probably from your Fijian experiences. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, it is now 5:02 and we do need to bring today's program to a close. So I'd like to say thank you very much to all our presenters today, Professor Keith McNeil, Nirmala Bibi Maharaj. Bibi, by the way, Maulana, you could probably say where this has originated, but most Muslim women in Guyana in particular have that name, Bibi. So what kind of a mix are you?
Well, we come from all walks of life of people.
Yeah, clearly. So, Maulana Shah, thank you very, very much for your contribution. And I want to thank Dr. Nasser Mustafa for connecting us. And I want to thank Professor Keith McNeil for connecting us with Nirmala. And I want to thank you all very, very much for all the information that you've shared. Thank you for your participation, Suresh Bhai. Thank you, Uncle Bobby and Chand and all of you all who've posted on the chat. I want to thank you all very much. Over to Shakira now.
Thank you, Shalama. And we want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today and for your participation. As we've said earlier, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and you can feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books. And remember, we are kindly asking for you to give us your suggestions. And if you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Mahabir for further details. Our topic next Sunday will be resources to be used in the study of grammatology and indentureship studies. So we want to thank our planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir and Shalama Mohammed, our IT consultants, Daryl Grantham and Navin Mangal, and Daryl again for designing the poster. So please visit, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.